Okay, then let's make a start. First of all, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. A few new faces, few familiar faces that joined us on previous events like these. So, welcome back to those that have joined us previously, and a warm welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. So, today's event is all about ransomware. Obviously, ransomware is massively dominating the news headlines in cybersecurity over the last few weeks, months, years, and it's something that's unlikely to go away anytime soon. So, obviously, it's a very relevant topic for today's session. So, without further ado, hopefully you can all see my screen. Okay, quick agenda for today's session. We'll do a quick bit of housekeeping just to make sure the next 45 minutes or so run smoothly. Introductions to the speakers we've got today. Very quick bit about us at Threat Protect before we pass on to Mark from Aserium. He's going to talk about various aspects of ransomware, going through some stats from the news that we've just mentioned previously, the typical attack journeys of ransomware attacks, some NCSC guidance, which is obviously very prevalent this time, how to prevent yourself from a ransomware attack, which is a massive key factor of today's session. And then we'll finish up with a wrap up and a Q&A opportunity. So very quick bit of housekeeping. You will be muted during the presentations. We do value your opinions, but just to make sure things run smoothly. You might have heard at the start, I've got a very senile dog barking in the background, barking at the wind. So just ensure that everyone can hear what's going on. You're going to stay muted during the presentation. You should be able to see on the left-hand side, we've got a emoji feature and a raise your hand feature. So if you have any reactions, if anyone cracks a funny joke, feel free to react with the emojis. There's a Q&A feature as well on the left-hand side. So if you have any questions, please put them in there and we'll get to those at the end, unless there's a really pressing question, which we'll try and get to as soon as possible. There is a poll running, so I'm going to start the poll at the moment just now. Again, that's on the left-hand side of your screens. And the question for today is very much focused on, obviously, this is a virtual event. We're quite keen to meet you all in person at some point. So let us know your thoughts on meeting in person. Is it something you're interested in doing anytime soon? Or, yeah, let us know. We're quite keen to do it, but we want to do it at a time that you're comfortable with. And it is being recorded, so if you do have to drop off for any moment, any reason at all, feel free to do so. We'll share the recording and the slides following the end of the session. And it is a CPD accredited event as well. And for those who don't know, that means CPD stands for Continual Professional Development. It means that it's been proven that this is educational. It's not salesy. Myself and Mark both marketing people, so it's not buy this, buy that. It's very much a thought leadership educational session to raise awareness of the various aspects of ransomware and how we can stay protected against it. So just very briefly introduce Mark. So we have got Mark Warren from Aserium joining the call. He's the marketing director. I myself, marketing lead at Threat Protect. My name's Johnny. And without further ado, I'll use this opportunity to hand over to Mark. So Mark, if you'd like to take control of the screen, and it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. I think I guess I'll make myself presenter. There's always one more confirmation you expect. Brilliant, there we are. And let's share my screen. So hopefully you can see my screen. I'll assume you can. Thanks for the introduction there, Johnny. Can I get a thumbs up? You can see my screen.
Just minimize that one, Mark, and then we should.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I can't see what I'm doing at the same time. Brilliant. Okay, sorry about that. Right, so in today's session, I'd like to take a step back and take a look at some findings we've made in some research we've been doing into how prepared organizations are for ransomware attacks. Take a look at common attack journeys and what we can do about them. So let's dive into that content. But I'd like to start with a question. It's not going to be too easy for you to kind of shout your answers back to me right now, but just out of off the top of your head, what do you think would be the answer to this question? How many organizations have been attacked by ransomware? Do you think it's a minority? Is it less than 25%? Is it somewhere between 25 and 50, 50 and 75%? Do you think the number of organizations hit by ransomware is over 75%? What do you think that answer might be? Well, we asked that question in the research we did. We asked a number of we asked over 1,000 UK organisations, IT and cybersecurity leaders, what they thought, and the numbers we got back were a little bit surprising. 79% of UK businesses said that they had been attacked, and this is across medium to large scale enterprises, and 68% said that they had been attacked in the last year. Now, those numbers are a little bit scary, a little bit big. In fact, I wonder if they're a little bit on the low side. I wouldn't be at all surprised if more than 90% of companies had been attacked, except maybe they weren't fully aware they had been attacked and their defenses had so far managed to hold up. We don't know. We certainly know that ransomware attackers have not been quiet over the last 2 years during the lockdowns that we've had and working from home and everything else. Ransomware attacks are definitely on the rise, and barely a week goes by without seeing a new attack. And remarkably, just before lunch, just before this morning, I saw this news report. KP Snacks announced that they detected an attack last Friday, and they've gone public with it today. Interestingly, as we'll see later, and we'll talk about the anatomy of a ransomware attack, they are already in a situation where not only have their systems been encrypted, but commercial data has been exfiltrated, and the attackers have started to release that information on the internet and have threatened that unless a ransom is paid, not only won't they decrypt the corporate systems, but they will continue to release more data until the ransom is ransom is paid. So this is exactly what we were talking about today, and it just highlights how timely this session is really, and how important it's going to be for anybody that's responsible for IT systems in this day and age. So really, with all of that, it's a question of when you will be attacked, not if. And when you are attacked, what are you going to do about it? Are you prepared to block and stifle an attack before it comes in? Are you prepared to recover after the attack happens? So it really is a change of mindset about, okay, I'm going to be attacked. What can I do to minimize the impact and maximize my chances of success and survivability? So that's what I'm going to talk about in this session. I'm going to take a look at the most common and most dangerous attack journeys, the kinds of systems that ransomware attackers are really going after these days. Take a look at why businesses aren't ready. Some of that is technology. A lot of that is technology. Some of it is kind of psychological maybe as well. Let's take a look at that. And I'll leave you some thoughts about how to prepare for when the eventuality happens that you will be attacked. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with Assyrium, we are a UK-based cybersecurity firm based just outside of Reading. We are privileged access management experts, so we protect some of the IT or protect the shared infrastructure in IT organisations for a wide variety of different companies of all different sectors, all different sizes, not just in the UK but around the world as well. And we've been public since 2016. We've been around since 2008. So we've got a lot of experience inside the company of dealing with this kind of cybersecurity threat. So what is this journey that an attacker normally comes in, normally tries to take where they attack an organization? Most attacks tend to start with a user, a human being, somebody inside the organization. This is, as you might call it, the largest potential attack surface. It's the largest, point of weakness in the business are the human beings. Think about the kind of people that are most exposed to the world outside of your business. That could often be your help desk or your frontline, your telesales team or frontline service desk, those kind of people. These are not necessarily very technically savvy, very cybersecurity savvy, but they do have to interact with lots of people outside the business as well as inside. Now, typically a user doesn't have a lot of power. They can log onto their laptop or their workstation, they can run their mail app, they can run their service desk app. They may not be able to access very many resources across the business. So if a user account is compromised, the potential impact of having that user's login credentials is relatively limited. You might say that the blast radius of that attack is quite small. But if the attacker can then get from that entry point to more powerful accounts, and maybe with a local admin account, which means it can start to install new software on that workstation or change configuration, or they can get all the way through the various layers to getting something like a domain administrator account credentials. Then they have ultimate power across just about all of the IT environment, and that can be really, really dangerous. So you can imagine, so once an admin account has been compromised, the potential blast radius of an attack is absolutely massive and potentially devastating for the business. So what does an attack look like that comes in via a user, like I say? So imagine that this human being that's on the help desk, or in your sales team, or wherever they may be, they're continually being bombarded by potential attacks. They could be sent links to downloads. They could be sent links to web pages. They could be sent an attachment, a document that's got macros in there, like a spreadsheet or something. These attacks are really very, very sophisticated these days. I've certainly seen these emails. The CEO seems to be sending you a message that says, "I'm on the call. I need to do something really now. Can you go out and buy me an Amazon gift voucher real quick, or just send me the bank details and I'll sort it out." Whatever. Those attacks look very plausible, and they can easily be. When you're rushed and you're busy, it's really easy to click on something that, in ordinary circumstances, or when you've got more time to think about it, perhaps you wouldn't. And it doesn't need very many of those attacks to be successful to actually do the job for the attacker. They can bombard people with lots and lots of messages, and one of them will get through. Of course, there are other sophisticated spear phishing techniques like social engineering, what have you, especially that kind of make it look like you're getting a genuine request from somebody you trust. Those are very sophisticated attacks. So but errors happen, mistakes happen, and that's perfectly understandable. So now you've got an infected workstation, and that's the start of this tale of woe. And probably that attack will be quite quiet, and it might just sit for a very long time, doing things like key logging, so trying to capture every keystroke, looking for patterns, maybe looking for patterns in memory. Things that look like usernames and passwords might be getting stashed away, ready to go live. And when the attack starts to find things that are interesting, it might start to exfiltrate that data, take it out of the business. So they'll be pulling out things like that user's username and password. And even though this is a user that may have very limited privileges inside the corporate network, it's not unknown for human beings to fall into easy traps of reusing passwords across multiple systems, or at least reusing patterns of passwords. Their favorite football team or birthdays or what have you. And those credentials may also be on that person's, um, loyalty card scheme, or their bank details, or their travel agent details, or whatever else there may be. So those credentials by themselves may have some value. So the attacker will suck those out and keep them for later because they may come into use at some other point. Quite easily, that user might have access to some shared resource, maybe a shared file system, could even be Dropbox or whatever, but it could be a network share somewhere inside the business. And that infected file might get copied out to that network share. If it's a document you saved there, maybe you've downloaded the installer for the latest version of what you think is a legit copy of Chrome, or a drawing package or whatever else, and saved that on a network share somewhere. Well, that's starting to move around the business. It's starting to what we call lateral movement across the network. And if somebody else then comes along and picks up that infected file, they can become infected themselves. In a worst possible scenario, it might be an admin that picks up that infected file. They may see that the latest version of that drawing package is there, or the latest version of the browser or whatever. So they'll get a local copy rather than going out to the internet and downloading a copy. And again, here, the attacker will start to collect up those credentials and either save them for later or start to pull them out of the business. And of course, now they're getting access to some really valuable accounts. This person may have rights to access the backup system, or access the security tools like the firewall, or the malware detection tools. They may have data like the IP addresses or other user account names that are stored somewhere. Worst case might be something like a spreadsheet or whatever, that might also be usefully sucked out by the attacker. These are getting to be more and more valuable. This is the blast radius is getting bigger and bigger all of a sudden. And that admin user, is going to have admin accounts on multiple back-end systems that are really interesting and really valuable to the attacker. I mean, after all, that is their job, to manage these IT systems. So it could be your hypervisor, whether that's VMware or Hyper-V or whatever you might be running. That hypervisor, the virtual machines in there, might be running really valuable systems like your website or your firewall or your other security tools. So within that hypervisor, we've seen attacks that go in and try to destroy those virtual machines or destroy the hypervisor, making it hard for you to get back to those systems later. They might have the admin accounts to the domain controller or to Active Directory. And at that point, you can do things like push software out onto every workstation across the business, or you might create new users with godlike powers across the network, or you might shut down people's access so that they can't access the systems they need to get their work done. A domain admin is incredibly powerful. And one of the ones that perhaps not everybody thinks about is maybe the backup management system. If an attack can get to that, it can do things like destroy backups or change the configuration of the backup system so that user workstations or database servers or whatever aren't being backed up as regularly as they should, or even being backed up at all. Of course, they could also get access to the back-end data stores and encrypt the backups themselves. The objective here being to make things as hard as possible for the victim to recover. And of course, you can be stealing data at the same time. If you get access to your custom database or your HR database, there's a lot of personally identifiable information that's of great interest to the attacker. So the attacker is trying to get to the most valuable parts of your network, which maybe aren't the things you first think of, and suck out as much data as they can, and may sit there for quite some time before going live and flicking the switch and say, right, now the attack is going live. And that could be so that the attack can find as many vulnerable and interesting systems as possible. But it's also likely that they'll wait for at least one or maybe two or more backup cycles. So if you have a backup strategy that says, yeah, we'll back up to an on-premise server, daily or weekly. Every month we'll copy to a cloud service, and every 3 months or hopefully more often, you'll take an offline snapshot of that data. Really, the attack wants to wait until you've been through all of those layers, and so that it can ensure the encrypted and infected data is at every level of that backup, making it really hard for you to recover. And of course, the further down that chain you go to recover, the more expensive it gets to recover anyway, because if you have to try and replicate your business since the last offline snapshot, that could be weeks or months behind. So attacks lie in wait until they can do maximum damage. And then when the time is right, the attack will go live. And then you start seeing these scary countdown clocks or whatever. And that KP Foods one, apparently they are seeing a clock that's counting down until the next tranche of data gets revealed on the internet. And at this point, you're into some kind of panic mode unless you're well prepared and you have your your recovery plans in place. KP Foods say they are, and they're working through their recovery plans. Great. I hope they do well with that. But it's kind of interesting that given the amount of damage that an attack like this can do, in our survey, we found out that just over half of all respondents thought that it might be more attractive to pay the ransom than to try and prevent an attack. Now, we don't have a lot of data behind this at the moment. We are doing some more studies this year to find out. But it looks like that could be for 2 or 3 reasons, really. One might be that people think that it's just too expensive to try to prevent an attack. Maybe they feel they can't prevent an attack at all, in which case we'll just hope that it never happens to us and we'll pay the ransom when it comes. Some people don't like taking insurance because it always seems a bit of a gamble. Why spend the money if you may never need to call on the insurance? Another reason might be that that people think that they can recover more quickly than they really can. Now, part of that will be not fully understanding how deep these attacks go, maybe overconfident in, if you're using MSP, for example, to provide your IT systems, you may be overconfident about what the IT supplier can do to recover, or maybe you have overconfidence in your recovery plans. So that may be a reason why people think is okay, we'll just assume we'll pay the ransom later. Either way, that's not really good enough. But it does lead to, well, it kind of helps explain another stat that we got, which was about how much people are investing in their protection. Only, well, less than half thought they were investing enough. Sorry, over half said they weren't investing enough in their protection. And that might tie into the fact that management isn't supporting them enough. Less than half of respondents thought that their senior management were supporting them in their prevention plans. And that's a big risk in a number of ways as well. One is, we're not, they're not setting up the systems to protect themselves, but equally it's leading to increased stress and burnout amongst these leaders. They're being asked to take responsibility to protect the business, but not getting support from senior management. So in this ransomware index report, and you can get it from the Assyrian website, we broke that down to 3 parts. And one whole part of that was the stress levels that are increasing inside IT and security teams because of this lack of investment and support by senior management. Now, part of the reason, as I say, why people aren't investing enough may be because it looks like it's such a complicated problem. And to be fair, it is, and it's not going to get any simpler. If you think about those administrator accounts that have that increased power and permissions, that increased blast radius, it used to be hard enough when those administrators were inside the IT team. But these days, those administrators could be almost anywhere across the business. Think about the person that manages your Salesforce environment. They know a lot about your customers. They've got access to customer data. They've got access to pricing mechanisms, a lot of sensitive systems there. Think about your HR system, which might be outsourced to Workday or whoever else. Again, a lot of personal information there about staff. Look at your finance system that might be using Xero or some other finance package. They've got a lot of financially sensitive information as well. So those admins are not just inside IT. So how do you protect yourselves in all of those different environments? So on the defense side, as the Americans might say, on the defensive side, it's complicated. Whereas on the attacking side, if you're a ransomware bad guy that's trying to make money out of this, it's actually a pretty attractive proposition. These days, there's even this emerging market of ransomware as a service. You can sign up and get all the software you need, the mechanisms for deploying it, and even some of these really advanced groups are offering help desks for the victims to help them decrypt the data once they've paid the ransom. So getting the ransomware and distributing it is really easy. You're charging the ransom and it's going to get paid in Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, so it's very hard to track down. The chances of being caught are relatively low. There have been not that many prosecutions so far of ransomware attackers. We have seen some, and hopefully that number will keep growing. But you've got this imbalance between the difficulty of defending and the ease of attacking. And increasingly, these attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. Like I say, going after those hypervisors or going after those backup systems, it's not just about everybody's desktop or even the customer database. It's crippling the systems that you will depend on to be able to recover after that inevitable attack occurs. And in fact, people are starting to understand that. Almost all of the people we asked did say, yeah, we do believe backups are an attack target for a ransomware attack. But surprisingly, to my mind at least, that only about a third are taking extra precautions to protect those backup systems. And that kind of protection is primarily around separating the people that need access to the backup management system from the credentials used to do that management. If the admin have their local accounts compromised, they will have no access to the backup system because that's managed through some other level of protection like privileged access management. And in fact, this is such a serious problem that the National Cybersecurity Center have called that out as a particular point to focus on in your ransomware protection. So in this report from, well, year before last now, they updated it. They make this particular point about backup strategy is a critical part of your protection mechanism, and backups need to be protected by privileged access management to remove that. And you want to remove that need for administrators to have direct access to the system, to the management system, and especially to the backup files themselves. You want to create a clear gap there. So really strong recommendation there. And there are, there are some different ways of achieving that. But what does that mean to that journey that we've just been talking about, that potential attack mechanism? So this is that story I've just told you of how an attack migrates through the network onto those valuable back-end systems. So where are the main points that you might be able to prevent an attack? Well, the first point, the primary defense, might be at that front end where the user is the first victim of the attack. You want to try and stop them from being infected in the first place. One of the things we found that's really strong there is to prevent that user from installing local software or from being able to run software with elevated privileges. Now that's difficult because many users do need to be able to install software locally, or maybe need to install updates. One scenario that we've been working with recently is where you might be using a tool like AutoCAD. And to be able to run AutoCAD and its various plugins, and to be able to update those plugins, you need to be running with administrator privileges. Now, as soon as you have those administrator privileges, that gives malware the chance to install itself, to change configuration. And interestingly, one of the attacks we've seen recently is changing configuration so that the Windows workstation is forced to reboot, and it gets rebooted into safe mode with networking. And at that point, the attacker can then install any software they like, because the machine reboots into safe mode before any other antivirus, anti-malware tools have been loaded. So you really need to lock down those workstations so that software can't be installed, configurations can't be changed. Now, the downside to that is that these people still need to be able to run their apps with elevated privileges, or to install, update their apps when they need to. And this is where we have a tool that helps with this called privileged endpoint management, that allows you to create an allow list of fingerprinted applications that are permitted to be run with elevated privileges. So the user can carry on doing their work, and they don't have to keep calling IT every time they want to update something or change something. So that's a primary level defense mechanism. As a secondary level defense mechanism, look at those back-end systems and protecting those critical systems like hypervisors and domain servers and backup systems. Separate those administrators from those valuable infrastructure pieces. And this is where privileged access management comes in. You can think of that as this virtual air gap, so that human beings can't access these systems directly, and therefore anybody that attacks the human being or their system can't get direct access either. And if you need to enforce policies like rotate passwords on a regular period, make sure passwords are really hard to understand, humans don't like them, you have a point of control that allows you to do that. And that's a kind of benefit that comes with this privileged access management at the center of your IT organization. So all of those kind of policies that you need, and you do need policies for these things. If you are certified for Cyber Essentials, for ISO 27001, for PCI, and many, many other standards, they all need you to show that you have active management of privileged accounts, and you enforce the concept of people only having the right level of access, the minimum level of access they need, to only the accounts they need, for only the right people that need that access for the right time, and no longer than needed. So when somebody moves from one role to another, they don't carry with them the privileges and the account details that they had before. That's a very dangerous situation, which we see many, many times, of the over-privileged or privilege creep, as we might call it, of people as they move around. But you can also do other things as well with PAM. It means that you can then start to do things like allow third parties or external partners collaborate with you, get into your IT systems, but do it in a secure way. It's more secure than VPNs, because VPNs open up kind of a big hole through which any kind of traffic can pass. But with PAM, you can say they can only access this particular server at this particular time, and you can watch in real time and record any sessions that they may create, so that you can go back and look at something when if the worst should happen and something goes wrong, you can do kind of a forensic investigation what was going on to find out where the error was, and many other benefits there as well. One of which is that not just controlling who has access to what systems and with what permissions, but you start looking at what are they doing while they're connected. So start to think about what work people are trying to achieve. And if you can, rather than giving access to a whole server with administrator or root level access at the worst possible case, if you can wrap up the work they're trying to do into an automated, you might call it a task or a playbook, so that they can only run that task. So if they need to connect to Active Directory to unlock an account or to create an account, let them do that, but don't let them have access to the AD management tool that also allows them to update groups or also allows them to delete users. And this is where a Asurium automation comes in as well. So that primary level of protecting the endpoint, don't let things get installed in the first place. Secondary level of protecting those back-end critical systems through PAM, and then protecting what people are doing with privileged accounts through automation. So there's kind of three levels to the protection story there, to preventing those attacks in the first place and increasing your chances of recovery afterwards. So I hope I've explained there, the typical kind of journey of an attack, how attacks proliferate around and why they can be so dangerous, the kind of weak points they're looking for, and how perhaps you can protect yourself against them. So I've been talking for a very long time there, so I'll take a quick breath and hand back to Johnny.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Mark. Some obviously some great points. We have had a couple of questions come through, so we can get to those now. That'd be great. So the first one. So there's obviously lots of recommendations that you've made in terms of identifying, protecting against ransomware. If you could give one recommendation, what would it be?
Okay, so try and keep it to one. um, one of the best things to think about in protection is coming back to I don't know if it's because of the American football or something. I've just got this kind of defense attack kind of story in my head. But if you're in defense, you want to think about what the attacker is going to try and do. So perhaps start thinking like a hacker. If you were trying to invade your systems, what would you try to do? You'd probably find the weak points of the entry points you can get into. You're probably looking for which are the most valuable systems inside your business, both for immediate value, like getting at your customer database or whatever, but also with this idea of making it as hard as possible for the victim to recover. So that's when you start going after the backups and the hypervisors, whatever, on that back end. So when you start thinking like a hacker like that, you might start saying, okay, so we need to start identifying which are our most um, uh, attractive targets, and make sure we're building our protection there first, and maybe working back from that point. So maybe your most valuable system, in fact, could be your Active Directory system or your domain controllers. Get those accounts, make sure you understand where those accounts are, get them under control, take a breath, and then say, okay, what's our next level now? And think, all right, now we're into the backups or hypervisors, or whatever, and start working out and out. But I'd recommend getting on and doing something, because something is better than nothing. And even if you're starting what looks like a fairly small project, you can keep building on that. It's really hard if you try to say, let's look at the entire IT infrastructure across all of our sites, across all of our departments, work out a big strategy for all of the protection across all of these things and join them up. That's going to be really hard. And the chances of success are slim because there are so many moving parts. And the longer you leave it before you get any protection in place, the bigger the window of opportunity for that attack, because they are coming at you all the time, every day, every hour, every minute, that somebody is trying to get into your business. So the faster you can close down any window at all is the better. So think like an attacker. Where's your most valuable system? And start discovering the risks there and start protecting against the attack.
Yeah, fantastic. I think it's a case of what are the big rocks, get your big rocks in place
Yeah.
first, and then fill it with the smaller ones. And then we use an analogy quite a bit at Threat Protect, where if you're starting off on a car journey, you don't think about where you're going to park your car. You think about, you check your mirrors, you check your tires, you fill your car up with petrol, you put your seatbelt on, you do all the small things, the most important safety things first before you back out the drive and consider which road you're going to take to get to your end destination. So yeah, fantastic. We have had another question as well. So you mentioned in your research that people, it says around 53% of companies feel like they're under budget or don't have enough budget or support to protect themselves from threats. What would be your, I guess, tips for making a business case to senior management in terms of getting their support and their backing to put the right things in place?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because that will probably vary, business to business. They may have an appetite for risks, which, okay, that's kind of fun, but that's not a long-term strategy. It's quite likely that it's education can help a lot there. I think that ransomware is something that happens to other people. You don't really, until you've been attacked, you don't really feel the pain. So education, trying to get people that aren't particularly technical on board and understanding the situation. So take a look at some of those case studies that are out there. That, some people are refreshingly, some organizations like SolarWinds, I thought, were very open in the way that they were attacked. This was the attack of SolarWinds make networking software that's embedded in a huge number of network devices from all sorts of different other vendors. So they're a software provider. Their software got infected and then rolled out to network devices all around the world, and they had a huge problem. They were very open in how they just uncovered the attack and what they put in place to protect that from happening again. But that is a really good example of a common problem that we'll also start to see a lot of now, I think. And I think I've seen it also called the buffalo jump problem. So the idea that if you can infect, say, a managed service provider who has 10, 100,000 clients, what if that MSP gets infected, then all of their clients can get infected. So if you start to look at a case study like that and look at MSP as a potential target, suddenly you might start to realize that actually the risks are a lot bigger than you might think. I think also look at some of the stories. Unfortunately, you don't get so many stories about how people have really suffered in trying to recover, just how bad things might be. I think that's worth bearing in mind the education. There may be other stories that work stronger in your organization. If you're a regulated industry, for example, if you're in financial services and you have to show compliance with PCI DSS, or you need to show Cyber Essentials so you can have your cyber insurance, you're going to have to provide a lot of data to say that you are taking all reasonable steps to protect your business. And if you can't show that you've got these admin accounts under control, you can't show that your backup systems are protected, you can't show that you've taken strong steps to prevent malware being installed in the first place, then you will leave yourself open to liability if an attack occurs. Actually, in fact, if you think you've got protections in place, just proving that, doing the audits that you have to do every month or every quarter, at least once a year, if not more, that could be a really expensive process to do if you're relying on manual processes, ticking off items on a checklist like a Cyber Essentials assessment. You don't want that to be an expensive task either. So if your business is interested in regulation and compliance, take a look at those standards, look at that privileged access management element, and look at what you could try to do to automate and enforce that up front rather than trying to prove it afterwards. So yeah, education, think about compliance, and try and maybe try, if you're not doing this again, try simulated attack, try a rehearsal. What will happen if all your systems got infected and you had to pull the plug on every server in your environment? How quickly could you do that, and how quickly could you bring them all back up again? Run some test cases and see just how ready you are. That might get the attention as well.
Absolutely, I think to use another kind of sporting analogy, it's
Yeah.
do what the opposition, in this case the opposition are the attacker,
Yeah.
do what they'd least like you to do, which would be to get obviously all those things in place and establish your baseline and think how they would act. So I think you've kind of covered it, but I'll ask it anyway. So is protection purely a technology issue, or is it more there's a human element as well to it as well?
I think the human element is absolutely there. We are all very fallible. We're all very busy. I said before, these attacks are very sophisticated, so it's all too easy to make a mistake. Now, it's not to say that you shouldn't be spending time, investing time in training. I think training for people to be aware of these attacks up front is absolutely valuable, not just for your business, but in life, that they should be aware of those kind of risks. That's absolutely there. So, if you can prevent whatever 95% of attacks getting even past the human being, that's a great start. That's a good win. But it's that 5% that gets through by accident, that could still be the devastating attack on your business. So you need that backup of the technology and the systems in place that catch anything that gets through that first wave. I've talked about some of them today. So if you like, you could say, bringing back a phrase from the past, trust but verify. Trust your people. They will try and do the right thing in most cases, but they can't be infallible. So be prepared for when things do get through, because they will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I think something that we say is, in an ideal world, you'd have unlimited budget to have all the software and all the solutions in place, which could make yourself unbelievably protected. But we all know how IT and software works. You'd need a ridiculous amount of money. It's just not realistic. So
Yeah.
going back to the points that we've made across the last sort of 45 minutes, it's a case of what's the priority for you, your organization, whether the industry you're in, the size that you are. So take a look at the baseline and yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks for your time, and thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate you giving up your time to join. Hopefully you found it useful. There's some contact details there if you have any questions on anything that we have covered. We do have a number of other sessions coming up as well. So we've got one next week on using collaboration tools such as Teams and SharePoint. So by all means, come along to that one. That's at 11 a.m. next Thursday. But yeah, thank you for your time. Do follow us on LinkedIn to see other updates. We have a number of videos. We'll be sharing the slides and the recording to this session as well. So if you want to go back and go over anything you might have missed or recap, then you can absolutely do that. And as I said at the start, this session has been CPD certified. So if you do want to have a certificate of attendance, we can absolutely provide that for you. Just drop me an email. If you haven't got it, it's jker@threatprotect.co.uk or hello@threatprotect.co.uk is absolutely fine as well. And there's a phone number and our website there as well. So with that, I will say thank you again for joining. Thanks, Mark, for your expertise this afternoon. And I'll give you 14 minutes of your time back.